Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different. We are setting aside the neat chronological history
We
books,
are.
and we are plunging headfirst into a much more fractured reality. It's this dense, dark, and I have to say, utterly compelling series of personal accounts.
And they all combine to form this really complex, sort of sprawling memoir.
Exactly. And the narrative, it spans everything from the domestic dysfunction of mid-19th century Liverpool right into the pure logistical chaos of the Crimean War.
It really is an intimate examination of how individuals cope when their whole world, whether it's war or, a family scandal, just demands its absolute emotional overhaul.
We're going to be tracking family secrets, the birth of modern photography, and the psychological unraveling of three key figures who are just. They're bound by tragedy and obsession.
That's precisely right. And our mission today really is to try and synthesize some kind of truth from these source materials that, well, they often violently contradict one another.
So we're dealing with unreliable narrators.
Oh, deeply unreliable. We have three of them: Myrtle, Georgie, and Pompeii, and each one possesses this highly subjective, highly polished version of events.
Right.
So we need to pay forensic attention not just to the fascinating events they describe, but to why they chose to record the facts the way they did.
The motivation behind the story.
The motivation. The central inquiry is how the human mind constructs a usable reality when it's faced with these overwhelming pressures of conflict and profound personal trauma.
And to set the stage for this world of, I guess, necessary deception, we have to start at the beginning with a truly shocking moment that dictated, pretty much the next decade of events.
The death of the family patriarch, Mr. Hardy.
Yes. This immediate catastrophe required the staging of a lie so elaborate, so audacious, that it needed the aid of a medical student, a street urchin.
The threat of rigor mortis.
And, yes, a hastily requisitioned Punch and Judy man's purple van used as a dead man's taxi.
It's just incredible.
The whole sprawling, traumatic story pivots on this single, perfectly staged fabrication. Okay, let's unpack this. So, the story really begins in this incredibly volatile environment, the Hardy household in Liverpool. It's a world that's completely defined by the people living in it.
And central to all of this is Myrtle. Her origins are, they're straight out of a Dickensian tragedy.
They really are.
But the way she views her life is with this stark, almost cold clarity.
So what do the sources say about where she came from?
Her starting point is, it's genuinely horrific. She recounts being found when she was just 3 years old.
Right.
In a cellar on Seal Street.
Okay.
And the source material is brutally specific on this. It says she was sitting next to a deceased woman whose throat had been, and this is a quote, nibbled by rats.
Oh, that is just awful.
Awful. She was nameless at first. They eventually call her Myrtle, which was derived from the street where the nearby orphanage stood.
So she was supposed to go to the orphanage?
She was scheduled for it, yeah. But a smallpox outbreak provided a temporary reprieve. A chance event, really, that allowed her to get into the Hardy home instead.
So she's adopted not out of, boundless love or charity.
Not all.
But out of pure circumstance and, I guess, interrupted bureaucracy. That really sets up the transactional nature of her existence there, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's this high-stakes, very confusing existence for a child. On one hand, Mrs. Hardy taught her to read, which gave her a degree of education.
Diana.
The physical discipline came from the housekeeper, a Mrs. O'Gorman, who administered beatings, as Myrtle puts it, for my own good.
Wow. And how does she process that? A child's mind trying to make sense of that.
Well, her internal processing of this is truly chilling. She claims that because she was not loved, she actually considered it a blessing.
A blessing.
Because it allowed her to bypass, all the messy complications of affection. It let her focus her entire undiluted emotional energy, her obsession, really, on Master Georgie.
So she sees herself as this pure source of devotion, completely unburdened by any need for it back.
Precisely. And the family itself is a mess of contradictions. You have Mr. Hardy, the patriarch, who boasts about his exploits in Madras.
Right, the tiger rug.
The tiger rug. He claims he personally shot this magnificent tiger skin rug that dominates the house.
A claim that Mrs. Hardy is not so keen on.
Not at all. She gleefully asserts he bought the rug at an auction.
Yeah.
That the whole story of his daring hunt is pure fantasy.
So right away, the tone is set. There's this massive gap between how they want to be seen and the grubby reality.
And Mrs. Hardy herself is a picture of distress, both physical and emotional. She suffers from a malfunctioning thyroid gland.
Which at the time would have been, what, Graves' disease?
Most likely, yes. It results in a severe stare, what we now call exalmos, and what Myrtle describes as a visible bulging misery. That internal tension is always on display.
And on this catastrophic August afternoon when Mr. Hardy doesn't show up, that tension just snaps.
Completely. Mrs. Hardy is in one of her states, obsessing over the time. 5 after 3, he'd promised noon. And her misery, Myrtle notes, is practically tearing the dining room apart.
And it falls to George, the son, to find him. He's studying medicine, already fascinated with photography.
He's the one who's forced to go out and look for him. He follows a screaming woman, described as wearing a torn chemise, into a dilapidated house on Mount Street.
The description of what he finds is, it's so graphic and immediate, it suggests a sudden, violent end, somewhere very far from the family's respectable image.
The source documents describe the figure lying on a brass bed, naked buttocks exposed, hands clenched on the bedrail.
And when George identifies the corpse as his father, the immediate concern shifts. It's not to mourning, it's to concealment.
The medical student immediately takes over from the grieving son. Georgie understands the crucial, immediate deadline, rigor mortis.
Can you explain that a bit, the science of it?
Of course. It's a biochemical process where the muscles stiffen after death due to a loss of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It usually begins within 2 to 4 hours.
So he's on the clock.
He's absolutely on the clock. If they didn't move him immediately, his body would set in that position, a telltale sign of the circumstances of his death. The whole story would be over.
And the phrase he uses is so pragmatic, so cold.
It wouldn't do to have Mr. Hardy arrive home shaped like a jackknife.
Chilling. That's the core instruction. They have to lay him flat and fast, or the pose itself will betray the lie.
And because George is frantic, focused solely on speed, he enlists the nearest person available.
Pompey Jones, the street urchin, the duck boy.
Right, and Pompey, with his local knowledge, suggests the Punch and Judy man's purple van.
It's so profoundly absurd. A puppet van for a clandestine medical operation.
And they had to batter open a nailed gate just to get to it, which highlights the sheer desperation and, frankly, the illegality of the whole act.
That journey home must have been grotesque.
Unimaginable. Myrtle is pressed into service. She has to ride inside this dark, bumpy van with the body, literally pinning Mr. Hardy down flat.
To make sure the rigor mortis sets correctly for their staged scene.
And the one detail that brings that scene into the realm of the truly macabre is Myrtle using the puppet baby, the actual Punch and Judy prop, as a comforting object during this terrifying ride.
An image of childhood innocence meeting this horrific adult death and deception.
Exactly. When they finally get him back to the Hardy house, Georgie orchestrates the entire staging.
Let's break that down, because it's a masterpiece of deceit. They avoid the master bedroom.
A critical choice. They deposit him in the blue room instead, and every detail is intentional. They clean the body, comb his hair back.
And they position his cheek on the pillow.
A small but vital action. It's specifically to keep his mouth closed, preventing the slack jaw that often accompanies death.
And the final touch.
Placing a second pair of his boots under the wicker chair near the wardrobe. It suggests he just collapsed after a strenuous night out, kicked off his boots.
It creates a complete, plausible narrative from a few carefully placed props.
And the official narrative George dictates is flawless. He died in bed from a cessation of the heart, which, as Myrtle dryly notes, was technically true. Just not which bed.
And this is the moment where George's other great passion, photography, is immediately weaponized. He uses his camera, this brand new technology,
to create a permanent record of the lie.
It's a powerful moment. It links science, art, and deception all in one act.
It does. George uses the wet plate collodion process. Collodion is essentially a solution of gun cotton that's cellulose nitrate dissolved in ether and alcohol.
So it's volatile stuff.
Highly volatile. You pour this solution onto a glass plate, you sensitize it with silver nitrate, and you have to expose it while it's still wet. It produces a stunningly detailed image, but it is highly vulnerable.
And he makes Myrtle part of this scene.
He does. He makes her stand beside the staged corpse, instructing her, "Stand stock still, don't blink," as she places her hand on the cold shoulder of her deceased master. For posterity.
But you mentioned the image is fragile. How does that technical limitation, the fragility of the collodion plate, reinforce the theme of fragile truth?
Well, because George is creating what's technically an ambrotype or a tintype, a direct positive image. The plate is chemically treated, and the resulting silver image is temporary unless it's properly fixed and varnished.
So it can degrade over time.
Exactly. George knows the collodion is prone to degradation. Over time, without perfect preservation, the image will oxidize. It'll darken until it turns completely black. It's a brilliant metaphor. The physical record of the lie, the photograph, is chemically destined to fade.
Just like the emotional memory of the event itself.
Precisely. It contrasts so sharply with the durable physical oil painting of the river that Mr. Hardy owned, which will last for centuries. The permanent record is the lie, but even the physical evidence of the lie is impermanent.
That duality, the fading chemical image versus the enduring, traumatic, and distorted emotional memory, that perfectly launches this deep dive into manufactured reality. So after the dust settles on this massive family secret, we shift our focus to Pompey Jones. He is the only other witness to the cover-up.
And he returns to the Hardy house, years later, now trained by George in photography. But he presents himself as not just an apprentice, but as a cynical student of human behavior.
So he uses his access to the house for more than just work.
Oh, absolutely. He uses it for what he calls experiments. He's deliberately testing the boundaries of perception and attention within this very rigid Victorian household.
He details operating in the early mornings when everyone else is still asleep. What kind of experiments are we talking about here?
They started small. Moving household objects, shifting the location of the poker, turning a vase just slightly. But he grew bolder.
He started swapping pictures from wall to wall.
Exactly. He notes specifically that he moved the painting of ships in the river from behind the desk to a spot beside the door.
And how long did it take anyone to notice?
It took Dr. Potter, who was a regular and educated visitor, a full 5 weeks to notice the painting had been moved.
Wow.
It just proves Pompey's thesis. People see what they expect to see, not what is actually there.
The psychological fallout of these pranks is pretty significant, though. It leads George's sister, Beatrice, to believe in ghosts.
Yes, the restless spirit of her dead father. Pompey's mischief translates directly into Beatrice's profound belief in the supernatural. She even insists her husband, Dr. Potter, consult a clergyman about it.
It shows the immediate profound consequences of these small, deliberate changes to a fixed environment.
But the pranks escalate until they hit a true point of disaster. And it involves that tiger skin rug again, the one Mr. Hardy supposedly shot in Madras.
The incident is just terrible. Pompey moves the rug.
And young Mrs. Hardy, Annie, trips over it. The fall results in a broken wrist and, cruelly, another miscarriage, her third unsuccessful confinement.
This is the critical juncture, isn't it? Pompey's intellectual curiosity, his desire to test human perception, it collides with real physical consequence.
It does. This act of mischief, as Dr. Potter labels it, is the undeniable cause of Pompey's eventual banishment from the domestic sphere.
So Pompey is expelled, but his relationship with George, which is centered on science and this volatile chemistry, it remains.
And this brings us to one of the most brutal passages in the source material. Pompey assisting George with a surgical experiment in Ince Woods.
Removing cataracts from an ape.
This scene perfectly demonstrates George's psychological detachment and his scientific zeal, and Pompey's cynical practicality.
George is trying to practice a complex, delicate procedure on a live subject. It reflects the early and often brutal history of ophthalmology.
It does. The setting itself is eerie, a cobweb-draped glasshouse at a place called Blundell Hall. The preparations are so clinical, almost ritualistic. Scissors, punch forceps, cotton pads, a wire contraption to hold the eye open.
And there's a common thread here, linking George's surgery and his photography. It's the volatile chemistry he uses.
Precisely. This is a deep technical insight we need to pull out. Collodion, the photographic medium, is gun cotton dissolved in ether and alcohol.
The same ether used for anesthesia.
Exactly. Ether is the anesthetic used for the surgery. So George is applying the same basic chemical compounds he uses to fix an image to glass, to render a living creature unconscious. It highlights a core element of George's character, his need for mastery over volatility, whether it's capturing light or suppressing pain.
Pompey's job is to administer that ether to the ape, and he describes the procedure with this profound sense of horror. He nearly chokes himself on the fumes.
He does, and he describes the ape's limbs as resembling a human's, which only deepens his moral revulsion. He observes the procedure through the cotton pads worn by the doctors, lens removed from right eye, aperture stiff, will need iridectomy.
An iridectomy is the surgical removal of part of the iris. That's a serious operation.
a very serious high-stakes operation.
Yeah.
And Pompey is just horrified by the clinical brutality of the scene, especially given George's reputation for treating the poor for free.
He sees the hypocrisy.
Yes, treating humans with charity, but maintaining this rigid, muffled, impersonal distance from Pompey himself, and inflicting cruelty on an animal in the name of science.
And the outcome of this supposed surgical triumph is just deeply cynical. George's friend, William Rimmer, declares that the veil had dropped from its eyes and it now saw the world clearly.
Pompey just scoffs at that romantic declaration. The ape is returned all but blind to its cage. And in the sources, Pompey notes that the ape immediately turns its back on George's camera.
Wow.
The subject of the experiment refuses to be recorded, refuses to be made part of George's scientific success narrative. It's this powerful, silent protest against scientific vanity.
So the scientific triumph only results in a deeper cynicism in its observer, Pompey, and a visible rejection from the subject itself.
Exactly. The irony is just palpable.
It seems George, who started by staving his father's death for his reputation, is consistently drawn to the volatile chemically, emotionally, and socially in this quest to exert control. Okay, so the stage now shifts from Liverpool's domestic and scientific drama to the global turmoil surrounding the impending Crimean War.
And our main perspective changes. It shifts to Dr. Potter, a long-standing family friend, and Georgie's brother-in-law. His voice is one of sharp, intellectual cynicism, and he provides crucial historical context for the coming conflict.
Potter is our resident academic critic, in a way.
He is, and his perspective is essential because he ties the domestic moral failure of the Hardy family directly to the administrative moral failure of the British Empire.
So what was the original plan for this trip to Constantinople?
Well, the original plan was for George, Myrtle, and Potter to travel, but it was disrupted because Annie, George's wife, insisted on joining them.
Why a change of heart?
A cholera epidemic back in Liverpool.
Right.
She was worried about safety. The irony is, Potter had already secured a safe house for them in Anglesey.
And Potter immediately suspects there's more to it. He suspects Myrtle's machinations.
He does. He believes Myrtle manipulated the situation, using the children and the cholera panic as justification, because she wanted to keep George firmly under her influence and control.
So the whole party goes.
Yes. And the ensuing voyage on the Cunard steamer Cambria is characterized by this social discomfort and absurd contrast. It's crowded with 200 people, troopers, officials, engineers, yet George is drunk every night.
And Beatrice, who had constantly boasted about wanting to sail before the mast, is miserably seasick.
The entire time. And Potter uses this confined space to launch his deep critique of the English establishment. He sees them as solely responsible for the coming catastrophe.
What specifically does he pinpoint as the failure of the aristocracy?
He uses incredibly sharp language. He dismisses them as buffoons, idiots, triflers. And historically, this is well-grounded.
Yeah.
The Crimean War was notorious for logistical and administrative incompetence. The aristocratic officer class, who gained their positions through purchase or connection rather than merit, were completely unsuited for the demands of modern warfare in a foreign land. They knew nothing of the terrain, the climate, or the resources of the vast Turkish Empire.
So Potter rails against their want of education.
He sees their incompetence as a moral failing that will directly lead to mass misery in the East.
And this critique is personified in the figure of Mr. Naughton, the violin manufacturer. He's the ultimate profiteer, masking his greed under a veneer of patriotism.
Exactly. Naughton represents the commercial class looking to exploit the war. He talks endlessly about patriotic duty while clearly focusing on profitable supply shipments.
Potter's mockery of him is just masterful.
It is. He notes the absurdity of the consular service recruited from the same aristocratic class, living in luxurious palaces, throwing garden parties, completely detached from the operational reality of the conflict. Potter tells Naughton there will be a great call for bricks, not violins, unless Naughton intends for Sebastopol to fall to the sounds of music.
To them, the war is still just a social spectacle.
Precisely. And amidst all this social commentary, Myrtle emerges as this fascinating figure of quiet power. Naughton, this shallow profiteering man, becomes intensely smitten with her.
Despite her described lack of conventional beauty, what is it about her? What is the Myrtle mystique?
She's described as smallish, pale, and flat-chested. But she possesses an intensity and a quiet, focused attention that Naughton finds irresistible. She has a capacity to cast a spell, She's the complete opposite of the flighty society women he's used to.
And this infatuation panics George.
It does. He's perhaps drinking heavily or maybe just worried about the social complications of Naughton's attention toward his, for lack of a better term, shadow wife.
So he invents a fiancée on the spot.
A captain in the 11th Hussars waiting in Constantinople. It's a rash, desperate measure, another layer of performance George feels compelled to execute.
And the moment Naughton blurts out the news at dinner is perfect social trauma. Annie is stunned.
But Myrtle maintains perfect composure. She looks straight at George, accepts the lie, and declares, "It's kind of you, Mr. Naughton, but I assure you it is I who am fortunate."
She doesn't hesitate. She immediately elevates the lie into an affirmed reality.
This acceptance is a defining characteristic of hers, and Dr. Platter links this domestic deception right back to George's earliest trauma, the death of his father.
How so?
Potter suggests that George's entire moral foundation was shattered when he discovered his father, whom he had placed on a pedestal, was a bully and a fraud.
And Myrtle was there for the fallout.
She was indispensable because she helped him rebuild his life, a life based on shared secrets. And Potter speculates on her self-awareness. Does she secretly prefer George half seas over?
Because when he drinks, he's more reliant, more vulnerable.
And therefore, more controllable. Her ultimate goal isn't happiness. It's proximity and control over the object of her singular devotion.
She is a survivalist, and her primary technique is maintaining George's need for her, no matter how many layers of deception that requires.
So, as the party finally reaches Constantinople, the atmosphere is just electric. It's charged with what Potter calls this hectic gaiety.
It feels like the last days of Rome, a society just twirling away from reality.
Absolutely. He witnesses the ridiculous spectacle of the spinning dervishes, and he sees it as a symbol for the entire city sweeping away from the approaching crisis.
The war, however, gives George an unexpected focus. He undergoes this visible moral and psychological shift.
He does. He stops drinking, he becomes dedicated, and he pursues a post as assistant surgeon at the barrack hospital in Scutari.
He does this despite having been rejected for a regiment role because of his marital status.
And this shift is driven by a deep-seated need for atonement or maybe self-validation. He confides in Potter, he asks him to be his executor, and he explicitly admits to things I have done that were not right.
So he sees the war not as a patriotic duty, but as a chance to find a prop or crutch to hold him upright.
Yes, a physical and moral framework to redeem the lies and compromises he made back in Liverpool.
But the reality of war strikes immediately. We need to underscore the conditions at Scutari.
Scutari was a nightmare. George settled into a post where the facilities were primitive, hygiene was non-existent, and the staff rotation was deadly.
How deadly?
3 doctors in his position had already succumbed to cholera before he even arrived. There were, as the sources note, rats for every patient.
And yet he stays.
He's surrounded by death and disease, yet he's dedicated. He finds purpose in this absolute chaos.
But the first major emotional shock for the party isn't military, it's personal and domestic.
Yes. Myrtle had brought a collie pup for the children, and she faints dead away after witnessing a pack of fierce street dogs tear the pup to bloody shreds in the hotel forecourt.
A moment of raw personal horror that stands out against the backdrop of this abstract military violence.
And critically, it reinforces George's lie about the fiancé. Naughton is there to help her, solidifying the idea that she is fragile and requires the protection of this supposed captain.
So by August, they've moved closer to the front. They're at Varna. George is working constantly, scratching ferociously from fleas, just exhausting himself.
And Myrtle adapts. She even adopts a Turkish woman's robe, demonstrating her ability to just blend into whatever environment George needs her in.
And then the chaotic force of Liverpool returns.
Pompey Jones. He arrives, now a dedicated war correspondent photographer working for an important newspaper. He's solely in charge of a photographer's van, setting up his apparatus in the camp.
And Dr. Potter notes that he is.
Insolent as ever. His presence brings the entire history of deception right back into George's life.
The tension comes to a head during a morale-boosting concert party. They're singing humorous body renditions of sentimental ballads.
And Pompey, wearing a wig, a ginger mustache, and a green dragon tunic, performs as the fire eater.
The irony is intense. The man responsible for so many of the Hardys' recent tragedies is now performing as a clown.
It's unbelievable. But it's the final ballad, Saved by a Child, that pushes George to an emotional breaking point. The song, about innocence melting sophisticated cynicism, moves George so intensely that he reaches for Myrtle's hand.
And he whispers, "I'll come to you later."
She is mad with happiness. She believes this is the moment George will finally choose her openly.
This is the peak of her emotional life, and it's almost instantly followed by the ultimate visual betrayal.
It's a devastating sequence. She waits up, but when George doesn't appear, she walks through the misty dawn and finds him in the medical tent, asleep on a straw mattress.
And he's not alone.
His arm is flung across the chest of the fire eater Pompey Jones, who is still wearing his ridiculous theatrical nightshirt in rouge.
The lie of the performance has bled into the intimate reality of George's life.
The man seeking moral redemption in war is sleeping with the man who helped him stage a death and ruined his wife's health. It's just shattering for Myrtle.
The sight immediately returns her to her misery and resentment.
And she confronts Pompey, who, with characteristic malice, just doubles down on his cynicism.
He undercuts her entire foundation of faith in him. He reveals that the Christian act she witnessed years ago, returning a duck to a woman on the train steps,
Was nothing but a rigged street trick for a payout.
Yeah.
He destroys the last vestige of moral goodness she had tried to ascribe to him.
And then Pompey delivers the truly crushing blow about George's motivations, shattering Myrtle's romantic illusion of their connection.
This is the core psychological truth of the relationship. Pompey reveals that George had confided in him about Annie's physical state, that she was no longer capable of bearing children.
Okay.
And George specifically told Pompey that he was glad of the resulting babies Myrtle bore, because it meant the resentment Myrtle felt, the lingering anger about her status, and the beatings evaporated.
He was using her.
He was using Myrtle's children and her devotion as a calculated means to manage her resentment and ensure her continued loyalty.
So George didn't seek love or redemption through Myrtle. He sought an essential service and controlled labor. Yet, even armed with this shattering truth, Myrtle's response is just absolute devotion.
I love him. He is my reason for living. It's an obsessive attachment that transcends any rational truth or betrayal.
Yeah.
She chooses to cling to the lie of proximity and control, even if he views her merely as a means to an end. It makes her such a tragic figure, defined by her devotion to a fundamentally compromised man.
So the army pushes on towards Sebastopol, and the psychological weight of this march becomes unbearable.
It does. And Dr. Potter, our intellectual guide, tries to find stability in the natural world. He observes that the relentless erosion and rebuilding described in Lyell's Principles of Geology reflects the shifting nature of man under stress.
This is a critical detail for understanding Potter's breakdown, isn't it?
It is. Charles Lyell's Principles of Geology, published in the 1830s, popularized uniformitarianism, the idea that the same gradual processes we see today shape the Earth over immense, deep time.
Which challenged the fixed biblical timeline of creation.
Profoundly. And for Potter, a man clinging to intellectual order, the war is a catastrophic, non-uniformitarian event. It's a sudden, violent disruption of all fixed moral and social principles.
So by lecturing Myrtle on geology, he's desperately trying to impose a stable, ordered, academic framework onto a world that's dissolving into chaos.
It's his shield. And the chaos is overwhelming. The journey sees bodies of the dead washing ashore after being tossed overboard, the weights having worked free. The march is brutal. No water. The sick are just dying on the wayside.
The visual horror intensifies at Balaclava. The harbor is choked with the bloated carcasses of horses, camels,
and the occasional human. Myrtle, now disguised in the patched-up uniform of a drummer boy for better mobility, stumbles upon a severed human leg, toes poking through the shreds of a cavalry boot. She screams, she trembles violently.
And as Myrtle is having this very real physical reaction to this profound horror, Potter's coping mechanism fully kicks in. He retreats into pure academia.
He starts lecturing her mid-crisis, standing near the severed limb on Homer's description of the approach to the country of the Laestrygons and the precise geological composition of the Jura rocks.
He is literally prioritizing the color of a rock over the horror of a dismembered human body.
It's his only way to cope. Meanwhile, George is increasingly fatigued, now attached to the Scottish regiment after his predecessor fell overboard. He's still seeking that elusive prop or crutch that will validate his mission.
And Pompey, how is he surviving?
With a cynical practicality only he could muster. He claims the photographer's van as his own, fortifying it with tinted windows, the same type of van, remember, that started this whole tragedy.
It's come full circle.
And he collects trophies from corpses, rationalizing it as keeping valuable goods out of foreign hands. He is focused on immediate material survival.
He also witnesses a profound act of desperation. A soldier intentionally shooting himself in the foot to escape duty.
A remarkable detail. It shows the extreme limits of endurance. Pompey notes the sheer difficulty of self-injury, and he admires the man's courage, deciding he himself couldn't muster the resolve to do it.
He helps the soldier and lies for him.
But it's not charity. It's a recognition of shared survival cynicism. He understands that escaping the battlefield, even through self-mutilation, is a valid response to an absurd war.
And this intense pressure finally pushes Dr. Potter beyond his breaking point. His academic shield fails, and he retreats into delusion.
He begins mumbling aloud, hallucinating his wife, Beatrice, who only appears to him in moments of extreme stress.
"She was beckoning me," he recounts. "I closed my lids, thinking to blot her out, but she was still there, finger crooked."
He's losing his grasp on the present.
He's substituting the chaos with the fixed memory of his loved ones. This period really confirms the psychological cost. Potter retreats into delusion, Myrtle into obsessive devotion, and Pompey into cynical materialism.
And before the climactic battle, tragedy strikes George's inner circle again. The death of William Rimmer, his friend from Liverpool, shot fair and square between the eyes during the siege. The war is now claiming his past.
And then comes Inkerman, a sudden, massive Russian attack estimated at 40,000 men.
Pompey, present with his van, is forced into service. He witnesses the hell of close-quarters bayonet combat, seeing men fight over the tattered regimental colors.
And we reach the final moment of George's quest for redemption at the quarry end of the valley. Pompey has just been sent to fetch a stretcher for an officer with amputated feet.
As George is leading the stretcher, Myrtle calls out his name. She later claims she only stumbled on a stone.
But that moment is key, isn't it? Was her call intentional, a final possessive act, or just a reflex?
We can't know for sure. But a wounded Russian soldier, propped against sandbags, lifts his musket and fires. George is shot. He lets go of the stretcher, and the barrel of gunpowder he was carrying rolls away, unused.
His final words are directed at Pompey, the man who knew all his secrets and shared his volatile affections.
George looks at him, eyes wide with surprise, and says, "You're a good boy."
A stunningly ambiguous final affirmation.
Spoken to the person he had loved, used, and feared in equal measure. George dies not seeking redemption from God or his wife, but validation from his co-conspirator.
And the final, ultimate staged reality follows immediately. It brings the narrative full circle back to the deception that began in Liverpool.
Pompey carries George's body back to the photographer's van. The photographer, focused only on his assignment from the important newspaper, needs a specific shot. A posed group of heroic survivors to show the folks back home.
And he needs one more soldier.
Pompey props the corpse of George up between two living soldiers.
And the final instruction.
The photographer gives the chilling command, "Smile, boys, smile."
Wow.
A freshly killed body is transformed into a triumphant survivor for the permanent record. A final, total fabrication broadcast to the world. And meanwhile, Myrtle is on the brow of the hill, dry-eyed, arms stretched wide, circling round and round, like a bird above a robbed nest.
The lie that started to protect a reputation in a private Liverpool parlor ends on a public battlefield, used to manufacture a hero.
Okay, let's just stop and digest that. What a devastating, detailed look at the anatomy of secrecy.
It's overwhelming, isn't it?
The entire life, from the discovery of a dead man in a rented room to the death of a hero on the battlefield, is just. It's driven by this human necessity to create a more palatable narrative than the one reality provides.
That's the absolute core lesson here. We have these three narrators, Myrtle, George, and Pompey, all intensely bound together, and yet their subjective accounts just fundamentally conflict.
The memory distortion is fascinating. George insists Pompey was drunk during the journey home from the cover-up.
And Pompey is adamant it was George who was inebriated. And the thing is, they are not merely lying. They are editing their memories to create a framework that allows them to function.
The story they need to survive.
Exactly. The only undeniable records are the physical facts of death and trauma, but the human mind immediately works to put those facts in service of a necessary story. That distinction between the objective physical fact and the necessary subjective truth is incredibly powerful. Dr. Potter's final retreat into lecturing on geology, using Lyell's complex ideas of gradual change to buffer the immediate violent changes of war, that really drives that home.
Absolutely. The tension between the physical facts, the cholera, the severed leg, the constant fear, and the manufactured narrative, the staged photograph, the war songs, the personal secrets, That is the true deep dive.
The invention of photography promised objective truth, didn't it? A perfect record.
It did.
Hmm.
But figures like George and Pompey immediately appropriated it as a tool for emotional and social control. They created a surface reality while their internal subjective reality just spiraled into chaos.
So what does this highly detailed look into 19th century war and domestic trauma mean for you, the learner, in the present day?
It raises an important question that I think demands attention today. In a world saturated with information where data points and narratives clash constantly, is the quest for a single, objective truth? Is it less valuable than understanding the diverse and potent ways that truth is internalized, distorted, and retold by the individuals experiencing it?
So you have to question not just the facts,
But the source's need for that specific version of the story to be the one that endures. What are they trying to justify, or cover up, or atone for?
a great and chilling thought to chew on. Thank you for guiding us through this incredibly detailed and dark history and for clarifying the boundaries between memory and necessity.
My pleasure.
We hope you, our listener, take the time this week to explore the nature of your own recollections and perhaps the essential stories you choose to tell yourself.